Hello, psychology students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have notes for Module 10, Motivation. So, a need or a desire that energizes or directs behavior towards a goal is called motivation. And there are some historical explanations for this. A complex inherited behavior that is rigidly patterned throughout a species is called an instinct. And psychological needs such as food and etc. are called drives. The idea that a physiological need creates a state of tension or a drive that motivates an organism to satisfy that need is something known as the drive reduction theory. And if you take a look at maybe the flow chart that you see down below here on the right hand side, you have a need such as food and water. Your drive that kind of creates that is your hunger or your thirst. And then the drive reduction is the idea that if you want to reduce hunger or thirst, you got to eat or drink. That's hence the drive reduction theory. Biological explanations for motivation. The theory that a degree of psychological arousal helps performance, but only to a point, aka the arousal theory, is called the Yerkes-Dodson law. This idea that if you are wanting to perform the best, you have to have a certain level of arousal. So if the optimum level of stimulation is low, such perhaps you'll go for a quiet walk or talk casually on a phone. But if the optimal level of stimulation is high, you might crank up your favorite radio station or enjoy a very vigorous workout. Sometimes when we are doing something that's difficult, we need to think about, how hard or how much stimulation or arousal we need for that performance. Um, Typically, if you look at kind of the middle diagram where we have kind of what looks like a bell curve, um, the goal would be to kind of have um, the best performance with about the medium level of arousal, meaning that we're kind of pumped up, but we're not overly pumped up. It's kind of like if you've ever heard of an athlete choking during a very intense, stressful situation, like maybe they have to shoot the winning shot for a basketball game, and they choke. They missed the important shot that they probably could have made if they hadn't necessarily been in that situation where they were, the winning person here or the winning shot. So needless to say, we need to think about how we balance our level of arousal. Sometimes we do need to pump that up to get the better performance. But if we're doing something that's really easy, we really don't need to really be that pumped up for it. So the tendency to maintain a balance or a constant internal state is known as homeostasis. Balancing our internal states means regulating things such as our hormone levels, the water levels in our cell, and also the blood sugar that we have. So all those things kind of come in, to play here. But again, optimal level is kind of like medium arousal. If you're, too aroused, again, your performance is going to be bad. If the arousal is low, your performance probably isn't going to be that great either. So, cognitive explanations. This is getting into something called intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So, a desire to perform a behavior just because of promised rewards or the threat of being punished is known as external motivation. So, if you remember back to grade school and you got stickers and things like that, maybe little prizes for completing certain tasks, that's really extrinsic motivation. A desire to perform for the sake of the act or just to be more effective is called intrinsic motivation, meaning that you're internally driven to do something. And there are a lot of people that they just love performing the task because they just love the task. It has nothing to do with a reward or a threat or anything like that. So the most creative scientists and artists and teachers are those working from intrinsic motivation. A primary concern about external rewards is that behaviors maintained by extrinsic motivation alone may not be effective to sustain that performance or behavior once the reward has been removed. So, if you take their reward away, people might say, what's the point? Whereas intrinsic, you're still doing it just because of the fact that you enjoy doing it. All right, clinical explanations. We're going to talk about the hierarchy of needs. And this goes back to a guy named Abraham Maslow, who you see pictured below. He was a humanistic psychologist, and he developed this concept of the hierarchy of needs. And it was kind of based on a pyramid of needs, beginning at the base. So if you look at the diagram here to the right, your physiological needs, that would be things like hunger, thirst, shelter, perhaps. These are the things that have to be satisfied before you can go to a higher level, like safety. So in other words, you cannot move from one layer to the next without meeting those needs. So when we are actively engaging in this, we are participating in the hierarchy of needs, and realizing our fullest and unique potential is the highest of this hierarchy. So we go from like the physiological needs, the safety needs. This is feeling safe and secure and stable. Things are organized and predictable. If you can get that far, then you can go on to the belonging and the love needs, meaning that you have a need to be loved and to love. This idea that you're being accepted and that you can avoid loneliness and alienation. Sometimes that's a real hard one to obtain. If you have done that, then you can move on to the esteem needs, need for self-esteem, need for achievement, need for competence, need for independence, need for recognition, need for respect, all of that. And once you have attained that, then you can go to the top, and that's self-actualization. This idea that you need to live up to the full and unique potential that is yours. The thing that's interesting about Maslow is that he didn't think that every person was actually going to make it to the very top of this hierarchy. Matter of fact, he had just a few people in mind that he thought were actually self-actualized. Abraham Lincoln was one. Eleanor Roosevelt was another. And I always kind of laugh because both of those individuals had a lot of quirks, a lot of issues that they were dealing with that might not have made them all the way self-actualized. So, achievement, motivation. This is a desire for significant accomplishment, for the mastery of things, mastery of people, mastery of ideas, and for attaining the highest standard. This is all called the achievement motivation. So, Henry Murray was the guy who kind of coined all this. He first established this concept of achievement motivation and developed an important personality testing tool. According to Murray, such motivation includes a desire for the following: significant accomplishment, meaning that you have basically proved that you can do this. You are the best. Okay. He also had this idea of the mastery of things, ideas, and people. Now, it kind of sounds a little weird when you say mastery of people, but being able to read people, being able to understand people, that's kind of what he was kind of referring to. But the mastery of things, being able to do certain tasks, mastery of ideas, being able to know certain things, that knowledge. And then to kind of round this out, attaining a high standard, meaning that you have the ability to go out and to achieve those kind of things that you want to do day to day. So if you take a look here, you kind of see this kind of what looks like a weird formula here, the little n and then like the ACH and such. That is your need. The little n is always the need, but the need for achievement. Okay. High need for achievement is like you have to win at any cost. You must be the top and receive, credit. There are some people that do have a low need for achievement. Okay. They might fear failure. They might avoid responsibility. People who have a need for affiliation demands blind loyalty and harmony, does not tolerate disagreement. There are some people that are like that. that, that need for affiliation is really, really high, but you cannot stray from the group. People who have a low need for affiliation might remain kind of aloof. They might keep their social distance. And then this need for power, this desire to control everyone and everything. They might exaggerate their own position and resources. Where an individual with a low need for power, they might be a little more dependent on others, or they're okay with being subordinate, meaning beneath. They minimize their own position and resources. So all of us kind of fall in between all of these here. Hunger, a closer look. There's a physiological or physiology of hunger. And the first begins with this idea of glucose. This is the form of sugar that circulates throughout our body. If you run low on glucose, you will probably start feeling hungry. This is our main source of energy. You also have insulin. This is a hormone that allows your cells to use glucose for energy and to convert it to fat. When levels of insulin goes up, the glucose levels tend to go down. There is leptin. Leptin is a protein that is produced by bloated fat cells, which sends out a stop eating message. This is one that a lot of researchers are looking at today. And then finally, orexin. This is a hunger triggering hormone produced by the hypothalamus. When glucose levels drop, orexin levels tend to rise and they make us feel hungry. So, again, along with leptin, understanding orexin might give us some understanding about why people are hungry and how hunger kind of manifests itself. Along with that, we need to talk about set point. Set point is a point at which an individual's weight thermostat is supposedly set. And when the body falls below this weight, increased hunger and lower metabolic rates will probably occur, and they will act to restore the lost weight. So our weight will kind of hover around the set point. The set point theory relies on three concepts. One, the basal metabolic rate. This is the body's resting rate at which we burn calories for energy. The other is the number of fat cells that we have. And then finally, the hormones that work together to keep our weight where it's designed to be. So when overweight people diet, their bodies view the reduced intake of calories as starvation, and their metabolism tends to slow down to conserve the energy, converting more glucose to fat in preparation for an apparent famine. So in a way, sometimes for overweight people, dieting does not work alone because of the fact that their body is trying to protect itself against maybe a possible starvation. Along with that, we need to mention a few things about eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa. This is an eating disorder in which normal weight people, typically female adolescents, have a distorted self-perception of being fat, and they put themselves on a starvation regimen. Sometimes they become dangerously underweight, meaning that they're 15% below what is considered the normal body mass index. Roughly 9 out of 10 individuals who have anorexia nervosa are adolescent females. Not to say that there can't be males, and there have been, but there's a tendency that women are probably more prone to this than men. Along with that, there is bulimia nervosa, which is also an eating disorder characterized by episodes of overeating, usually of high-calorie food, followed by a purge, meaning the vomiting or the use of laxatives or fasting or excessive exercise. Anorexia usually starts as a diet, and bulimia has its origins in a diet broken by some kind of gorging. Those who idealize thinness are more prone to these eating disorders. One of the things that we should mention, when we talk about certain eating disorders, they do have a physiological impact. They can obviously cause other issues that are going to happen within the body itself. meaning that, for some women who have anorexia nervosa, they can have hair thinning, or their hair becomes very brittle. They can deal with low blood pressure, slowing heart rate, maybe even a situation where there's a fluttering of the heart, maybe even heart failure, perhaps anemia within the blood, the muscles and the joints start having issues. You can have bone fractures, kidney stones can start manifesting themselves, even kidney failure, bodily fluids. There's a little more potassium, magnesium, and sodium, which is or lower levels of those. Constipation and bloating can be other issues. The skin becomes incredibly dry. When we talk about bulimia, one of the things that happens because of the type of purging, if an individual is vomiting quite often, is the problems that you're going to have within your mouth. You're going to lose tooth and enamel. Even the gum tissue is going to start having problems. The photograph that you see kind of to the far right is one that was taken from an individual who has bulimia, and you can take a look at the teeth there, and even the palate, the upper palate. There is basically a lesion there. The teeth, you can see how they're decaying. All that is because of when the acids from the stomach come back up, it can start doing damage to those tissues in the mouth and obviously the teeth as well. Sometimes this might be the way that bulimia is going to be shown, because a lot of times people who have both anorexia and bulimia are very secretive about the issues that they have here. So, needless to say, watching for those kind of things can be very important. Thank you very much.